Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody today? Okay. Before I get too far with our presentation, I want to introduce Sarah Landry to speak about what this month means to all of us.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah Landry. Most of you look familiar to me. So May is Older Americans Month, and it's a way in which we can understand issues that may be presenting to older Americans. So I am very excited that ACES partnered with us in regards to this program and is working to educate people on the wonderful things that older Americans and older adults have contributed to this cause. So thank you so much for coming and learning about the amazing work that's done by older Americans. Just speaking with Nikki, it's so important that we stay engaged as we get older, that we don't stop growing and contributing to our communities. It's what makes our lives so enriched. So thank you for being a part of that. These conversations are so important for the community and for all of the generations that come after us, and you are a huge part of that. So thank you to all of you. And I hope you enjoy celebrating Older Americans Month this month. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, some of you that have been here before probably heard the speech again, but this is a lot for the newcomers. These ECHO conversations are meant to share thoughts, resources, information, and personal stories that will spark conversation among participants about how to be better stewards of our planet and our local communities. We hope that the discussions will be lively, transformative, and the community spirit uplifting, and we hope that it will spark a call to actions. Today's presentation is titled, "The Wisdom of Environmental Elders, You Are Never Too Old to Make a Difference." As part of celebrating the month of May as Older American Month, as Sarah mentioned, we will be spotlighting the contributions of 6 individuals who spent a lifetime as environmentalists and are a perfect example of our topic and message for today: you are never too old to make a difference. Shortly I will introduce Michael Watkins, but today's presentations will spotlight 6 individuals: Jane Goodall, who will start the presentation today. And we will have Rachel Carson, presented by Nikki Gerard, Al Gore by Lon Hutchmeister, John Muir by Steve Pucci, David Edmore by Arcuria, and Sylvia Earle with my Michael Watkins. If you will, leave the questions until after the presentation. There'll be ample time to answer those questions. And if you would, silence your phones now, and I'll turn it over to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. We're going to start off with a video by Jane Goodall. We were planning this talk already, and Earth Day came along, and she had a very poignant message, and I shared it with our team, and we thought it would be excellent to open this up by playing her message, which is on point. It represents what ACES does, and I'll just start playing it.
Hello, this is Jane Goodall with a message for Earth Day 2025. There's one really urgent message that I want to share on this day. I urge everyone to treat every day of the year as Earth Day. Planet Earth is the only home we shall ever know, yet we are relentlessly harming it. We're destroying forests, woodlands, wetlands, peatlands, savannas, prairies, and all the other ecosystems I haven't mentioned. We're polluting rivers, lakes, and oceans. We're emitting greenhouse gases that are causing temperatures to rise. which lead to changing weather patterns, with more hurricanes, typhoons, floods, droughts, heat waves, and forest fires that may destroy our homes. We're in the midst of the 6th great extinction of plant and animal life. If we add to this list the fact that hundreds and thousands of people are suffering from war, poverty, and discrimination, well, it's not surprising that more and more people are losing hope. So people ask me if I really have hope for our future. Well, I do believe there's a window of time when we can at least slow down climate change and loss of biodiversity, but only if we get together and take action now. And without hope, we will fall into apathy and do nothing. If this happens, we are doomed. So let me share my reasons for hope. Probably many of you already know them. Firstly, there are our young people everywhere. Once they understand the problems and are empowered to take action, they're rising to the challenge. Our own Roots and Shoots movement, now in 75 countries, is growing fast and involves young people of all ages. They're truly making a difference and often influencing their parents, grandparents, teachers, and friends. Secondly, nature is amazingly resilient. I've seen so many places that we've totally destroyed where nature has taken over again when given time, and perhaps some help, sometimes from Roots and Shoots young people. I wrote a book about animals on the brink of extinction that are being given another chance. How? Because of individuals who were determined they should not vanish, people who demonstrate that indomitable human spirit, tackling things that seem impossible and succeeding. And then there's our amazing human intellect. Science are working on technologies that enable us to live in greater harmony with nature, like alternative energy, for example. Perhaps some of you are thinking, how does this affect me? What can I do about these things? And if that's the case, I say to you that every day you live, you make some impact on the world, and you can choose what sort of impact you make. You can remember to turn off lights. Perhaps you can walk or cycle or take a train or bus instead of using a car. You can think about what you buy. When it was produced, did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? Then search for a more ethically produced product. Will it cost more? Probably, but then you'll value it more and waste less. And waste is a huge problem today. And another very important thing you can do is to adopt a plant-based diet, partly because it will greatly reduce the suffering of the billions of animals currently crammed in horrible conditions in factory farms, but also because huge areas of habitat are cleared for growing the food to feed them. Much water is needed to change vegetable to animal protein, and water is scarce in more and more places, and the animals produce methane during digestion, a very virulent greenhouse gas. And perhaps I should add, it's healthier for us. Millions and eventually billions of people thinking about their own environment footprints every day will make a huge difference and go a long way towards healing Mother Earth. And remember, we depend on Mother Earth for food, water, well, everything. So for the sake of our children and all future generations, and for the sake of Mother Earth, please start today. Not only on this Earth Day 2025, but on all the days that lie ahead. Thank you for helping to make a difference.
Wonderful, wonderful message. And we just finished Earth Day in April. So I'd like to introduce Nikki Gerard, who will present Rachel Carson.
Oh, yeah.
in the right spot.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Nikki Gerard, and welcome to Eco Conversations for May, and I'd like to discuss one of the most unassuming great environmentalists of the 20th century, and that's Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson came to fame in the 1950s and 60s, which many of us remember as a time of fast-paced growth in business, industry, families, technology, and science. It was also an idealistic and patriotic time where people placed significant trust in the government and science. This quote by Rachel Carson illustrates the idealism and trust that people will do the right thing. The more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe, the less waste we shall have for destruction. Next slide, please. Yep. Rachel Carson's most notable environmental contribution to the world is Silent Spring, a book published in 1962 and turned the big chemical companies on their heads. During World War II, the pesticide DDT had saved lives through massive use in the South Pacific jungles, where malaria immobilized almost half the GIs fighting and helped control typhus outbreaks in Italy. But scientific evidence was beginning to come to light about DDT's negative attributes, especially its destruction of the food chain of many animals, and most significantly, birds of prey. So much DDT was being sprayed indiscriminately that it infiltrated lakes, streams, oceans, where fish ingested and concentrated it. Birds of prey, particularly ospreys and eagles, were decimated. They ate the contaminated fish, and the DDT caused the shells of their eggs to be so thin that they would be crushed during incubation. Many birds were brought to the edge of extinction. Only in the last 20 years have large birds of prey become regularly visible again. Next, please. It was difficult for Carson to get Silent Spring published due to the fact that so many of these industries were so large they influenced politics. So they were willing to serialize her book every week. The chemical company leaders reacted with scathing reviews. Industry pushed back on Carson's book, scientific research and evidence, even though all the information and the data in the book had been thoroughly reviewed by scientists. Following the publication of the book, Carson, as a woman of science, faced personal attacks, looking to undermine her as a bird and bunny lover, and as a woman out of control, going outside the bounds of her gender by making claims about an industry within the scientific community. The chemical industry campaign backfired as the controversy increased public awareness of potential pesticide dangers. A CBS Reports special in 1963 spurred a congressional review of pesticide dangers, and John F. Kennedy's Scientific Advisory Committee issued a report in 1963 backing Carson's claims. Next, please. The results and impact of Carson's works had a powerful impact on the environmental movement. Silent Spring was a rallying point for the fledgling movement of the 60s. Her work and activism inspired are partly responsible for the ecology movement and the overall strength of the grassroots environmental movement since the 60s. Though environmental concerns about DDT had been considered by government agencies as early as Carson's testimony before the President's Science Advisory Committee, the 1967 formation of the Environmental Defense Fund was the first significant milestone in the campaign against DDT. The organization brought lawsuits against the government to establish a citizen's right to a clean environment, and the arguments employed against DDT mirrored Carson's. By 1972, the Environmental Defense Fund and other activist groups had succeeded in phasing out DDT in the U.S. Carson was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Jimmy Carter in 1980, but the Reagan administration's economic policies rolled back many of the policies adopted by Carson's work. A little quick background. Oh, did I screw that? Where am I?
We're sorry. Your background was your last one.
Oh, did it get moved? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
You want me to do that now, then?
No, it doesn't matter, I'll do this. Rachel Carson was born, I'll do a little dance. Rachel Carson was born in, go back to her background, since I'm there. Was born May 27, 1907, and died April 14, 1964, in Springdale, Maryland. She received her BA at Chatham University, magna cum laude, her MS from Johns Hopkins, but she dropped out of her doctorate studies in order to work and help support her family during the Depression. She became a marine biologist, writer, conservationist, whose Sea Trilogy and Silent Spring are credited with advancing marine conservation and global environmental movement. Her poetic writing style made scientific knowledge easier for the average person to understand, making scientific topics approachable. Let's move on. Where are you? Environmentalism. Okay, Carson's work had a powerful impact on the environmental movement. Silent Spring altered the balance of power in the world. No one since would be able to sell pollution as the underside of progress so easily and uncritically. That's a quote from H. Patricia Hines, who was Carson's biographer. Carson's work and the activism it inspired are at least partly responsible for the ecology movement and the overall strength of grassroots environmental movement. Rachel Carson did not set out to be an activist or an environmentalist. Her research compiled the scientific evidence that demonstrated the health and environmental impact of discriminate overuse of pesticides. Also, she was clear that pesticides had their use, but alternatives and rational deliberation must be implemented. So legacy, as you can see, this is a very incomplete list of some of the highlights of Carson's legacy, and it goes on, but I just wanted to sum it up by saying Rachel Carson was a brilliant writer and passionate about doing the right thing. I only wonder how much more she could have contributed to the environmental movement had she survived her cancer. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to bring Al Gore up. Well, not Al Gore, but Lon will speak about Al Gore.
I'm going to take these off. I'm going to be able to read my notes. Hi, Lon Hockmeister. I'm with ACES, and I'm going to talk about Al Gore. So I have a little different approach to this. When I started looking up what Al did, of course, he's a contemporary. He's just 3 years younger than me. I was impressed by the flow of his life and what he did. So I'm going to start out with his early life. So he was born in '48, so I was already 3 years old then. His father was Albert Gore, and he was in the House and the Senate. And in the 50s, he actually, if I'm talking to this, in the 50s, he was actually made a run for the presidency and didn't get through the Democratic the primaries. So Al, at 17 years old, went to college. He ended up with a degree from Harvard in a field called government. That's what they called it. A senior thesis was on the impact of television and the conduct of the presidency. So he'd been through the Nixon-Kennedy debates and seen the power of getting that presentation and getting your information out to public. He got out of school, and like many of us, were facing Vietnam. He enlisted and served a lot of his time in the States, and eventually ended up over in Vietnam in a couple different places, but he was with the engineering group, so he wasn't out in the jungles. So let's go to his political life. So after getting his degree, getting back from Vietnam, he got a job on the political beat of a newspaper, and he was there for 3 years. And while he was there, he was taking classes at Vanderbilt. And in '74, he decided to go full time as a student and enrolled in the law school. And his mother had been a lawyer and been there in law school, gone through one of the first female classes that ever came out of Vanderbilt in the law department. So He dropped out of that when an opportunity came up to run for the House of Representatives. And he ran and he won and served 4 terms in the House. After that, he had an opportunity to go into the Senate. Opening came up, and he served 2 terms in the Senate, representing Tennessee. And then he got approached by Bill Clinton and ran for president and vice president, and they were elected. They had 2 terms there, and then he went out and tried to win. Everybody remembers that one, right? The hanging chads. So he lost the presidency by 5 electoral votes, and then continued his life. So that was kind of his political career. So what else was he interested in? So he calls himself a geek. He admits that. He got real interested in computer systems, and something that was kind of started up in about 1969, which was ARPANET, the Advanced Advanced Research Planning Authority, I guess. So a military group, and they put together kind of an internet type thing where they could talk with research scientists and the academic community and the military. So it was just a way of sending information back and forth, and it was called the ARPANET. This is kind of interesting. The first email was sent in 1971 on ARPANET, and Gore. Oh, I'm giving his age on the left. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. So this is his life is going on, and things like this are happening. And so when he was 23 years, first email sent. When he was 30 years, the first spam went out. I thought that was kind of interesting. And at that point, he was in the House, and he got interested really interested in started doing stuff in the information exchange technology. And he was pushing really hard to get the public somehow involved in this ARPANET. So when he was 38, so that was a couple years, he was in the House a couple years, and then when he was in the Senate, he introduced the Supercomputer Network Study Act of 1986. Okay, so that started studying the big computers. I don't know if anybody remembers or what you guys were doing. I was in science, so I was working on computers. And my first computer was 1963. It filled a room about 1/4 the size of this. It had 2 air conditioners in the window to keep up with the heat that it generated, and 1 person. When you were on it, that was it. And the equipment filled that room. That was 1963. And from there, we went to the larger machines, but they were always isolated. They always, they weren't communicating with it. You were on the machine, you could send maybe a text to somebody else that was on one of the terminals, but they weren't communicating on any kind of a broader scale. So the network, so when he got into the Senate, he introduced a bill with High Performance Computing and Communications Act of 1991. That was called the Gore bill, but it had some teeth. It provided $600 million, a sizable amount of money then, to develop the Natural Research and Education Network and Information Superhighway. That's where that terminology came. So developing something that we're more into communication. So 2 years later, in a collaboration between academia, industry, and the government, he led the development of a program called Mosaic, which is the world's first internet browser, so going out and collecting information. So he's right, he was calling himself a geek, he was behind all this stuff. So Gore did not invent the internet, which right, he gets a lot of grief for that, but he did create the environment that led to the creation of the internet. And he was misquoted. He never said he invented it, but he did say he created it. Okay, so we're kind of done with information technology. So what else was he doing while all that was going on? Well, he was out of politics at this point, and he got going, and there was the realization that something was happening to the climate on the Earth. And he got into the Climate Reality Project. Now he's 57 years old. And his goal was to educate and get people aware. And everybody remembers when you'd see him up, talking, and a lot of presentations. When he was 58, a year later, Gore had the documentary and a subsequent book, An Inconvenient Truth. I'm sure we've all seen that. raises significant public awareness about global warming and its impact, and he got an Academy Award for that movie. In '58, also he was jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize with Intergovernmental Panel and the Climate Change for raising awareness and promoting solutions for climate change. So his work now is being recognized internationally. And when he was 61, he published Our Choice, a plan to solve the climate crisis, which actually provided steps, and here's things we need to do if we want to protect our environment. Going forward, in 2017, now he's 69 years old, the book and documentary Inconvenient Truth sequel. So it was coming back and looking at it, and it was called The Truth to Power is probably what you remember the title as, describing the steps that we had done, but how much we had to do coming up. So at 70, and then 73 years old, co-founded the Climate Trace, which was was a tracking program for actually making measurements of this releasing of carbon dioxide from industry and what are all the sources. And at 75 years old, he remained the prominent voice in global climate change and movement, raising awareness, promoting policy changes, and investing in renewable energy. So right now, these days, he's 77. And he's out there, he's still out there, he's an advocate for climate change, and he supports the Climate Reality Program. He's still the executive director there. But he is, like Jane was saying here, he is now, so what did ACES do last November? We said, no more manna from on high, right? If we want to get something done environmentally, let's focus locally. Al has taken the opposite approach. He said, we're not going to get stuff in here, and now he's looking at internationally. So that's what he's doing these days: get the message out and more international action. And I've probably gone over my time. I wasn't much. So, quite a career.
Good job, thank you. John Muir, presented by Steve Pucci.
Hi. John Muir was a brilliant outside person. His whole life he spent outside. He was born in Scotland. His family moved to the United States when he was 11. They moved to Wisconsin. They lived in Wisconsin. He grew up in Wisconsin, basically, but he never lost his Scottish accent or his Scottish roots. He went to the University of Wisconsin, took a few science courses, but never got a degree. He never finished anything after that. He moved on. He moved on to his own personal adventures. He did a number of books early. He walked from Kentucky to Florida on back roads and wrote a book, 1,000 miles, walked to Florida. He wrote a number of different books, all outside-oriented, adventure-type stuff. And he was very active in it. He never did get a degree, as I said. When he finally he was born, let me start with this. He was born in 1838 and died in 1914. In 1878, when he was 40 years old, he moved to California. First thing he did when he moved to California was he visited what he was told by other people was a spectacular location. Yosemite, what became Yosemite National Park. The Yosemite Valley, which is a photograph here, and a photograph also by Ansel Adams, that's another for later. But this is the Yosemite Valley. Spectacular area. There was one national park at this time. There was Yellowstone was the first national park, formed 20 years or ways earlier than this. He was bound and determined to get Yellowstone, to get Yosemite and Sequoia national parks to be the next two national parks. He lived in Yosemite. He built a small cabin, lived in Yosemite in a little river, over a little river. He built a little cabin, lived there for 3 years. and became a fixture in the park for anybody that would go to visit him, visit the park, would visit with him. He met a lot of people in the park because a lot of people went there. Now, it was pretty remote then. It was a stagecoach, probably a 2 or 3 day stagecoach ride from San Francisco. San Francisco, which was in the post era of the gold rush, so there was a lot of population in San Francisco area that all came from the gold rush. So a lot of people would go there and they would visit him. He would sort of the guru on the spot, and talk about the terrain and what there was, and he'd get into conflicts with geologists because his feeling was, and he was one of the early ones to say this was created by glaciers. A number of the geologists in that era said, no, this is all volcanic. Volcanoes created this landscape. He said, I think it's glaciers that carved it, which of course became, in fact, how they were carved. They were carved by glaciers. So he was in that. He was always had a copy of Ralph Waldo Emerson's essays or a book with him. He read it all the time when he was by himself. He was by himself a lot in the woods, so he would read that all the time and became very close to Emerson's way of thinking. It was a religious kind of an appreciation of the terrain more than anything else. When he was young, as a boy in Scotland, he was a very conservative religious family. He had to memorize the Old Testament and memorize the New Testament and be able to recite them. And as he said later on, when this became his religion, which it was, the testaments just kind of floated away. He did not hold his memory after that. He moved on to his own terrain, which was this. In 1881, Emerson came to meet him there. He came to Yellowstone. I'm saying Yellowstone. He came to Yosemite. He came to Yosemite and he met him here, and he spent a couple of days with his hero, his mentor, Emerson. And at the end of a couple of days with Emerson offered him a teaching position at Harvard. He said, you have to come east and you have to teach at Harvard. He looked around and he said, I'm not leaving this to go to some professorship. I'm not going to do it. So he declined. He said, no dice. He formed, after this, they wanted to get this designated a national park to protect it. They did get it designated a national park. However, the national park gave the mentorship to the state of California. So there was no National Park Service then. The national parks, this park was controlled by the state of California. Now, his complaint with the state of California is that they're focused on business and they're focused on what we can draw out of this for lumber or mining or any of this kind of stuff. If it's controlled by the state, they make the rules. He was adamantly against that. He said, this has got to stay pristine the way it is, and no lumber. You can get lumber somewhere else, you can mine somewhere else, but this land needs to be the way it was and left the way it was. So he was adamant about that. It took a battle of years and years to get, to bring this to the next point. He finally did bring it to the next point. They formed the Sierra Club. He was the president of the Sierra Club in 1892. He was president until he died in 1914. Maybe the next. We have a picture of him in his work clothes. And I think these are probably the only clothes he had, actually, because there was never a formal setting for him. But he formed the Sierra Club with a small group out there. The idea being to protect the Sierra Mountains. of which Yosemite is part of, and all of that area of Northern California, which is a spectacular area. I'm sure a number of you have been there. It's a stunning area. So they formed the Sierra Club. The idea of the Sierra Club was to push for the federal government to take this property over and manage this property, because he felt that the federal government would be above the regional state government that would try to profit from it somehow, or let's get trains in here and let's make this a busy place. So they worked for it for years and years and years. If you go to the next one. The next one he got, this is in 1903. Now, Teddy Roosevelt was president in 1903, became president in 1900. And Teddy Roosevelt was an avid outdoorsman, as we've all seen over the years, an avid outdoorsman. So Muir got Teddy Roosevelt to come and camp with him on, this is Glacier Point, for 3 or 4 days in 1903. Teddy Roosevelt came out of it, we have to take this park over. He convinced him that there was going to be no development in here, that the state really wasn't capable of running it the way it needed to be run. So he convinced Teddy Roosevelt. He said they woke up the second day and they were covered with snow. It snowed overnight. And Teddy Roosevelt said he had the best night he ever had in his life. And Muir also said, I loved the man. He was great. So he was an avid outdoorsman. They both were. So finally, 1906, the federal government took over Yosemite Park and Sequoia Park also, Sequoia National Park also. So they were taken over by that. They felt that it would be, as it has been, I'm sure a number of us have been to national parks and they're beautifully managed, and hopefully they continue to be beautifully managed. I can say no more than that. So he finally met Teddy Roosevelt. He'd met Emerson, and it really had become his religion, the environmental needs of the country, and that became his religion, I think it was fair to say. He was committed to it. The Sierra Club continues to this day and is still very active in the same vein as an environmental group. One of his biggest things, I think, is his continuity at this. He did this really when he almost woke up when he was 40 and hit California. It almost woke him up. He was in several little malaise before that. He did get married in 1880, I think. He got married, had 2 daughters, 2 children. He worked for his father-in-law's, had a farm close by in Northern California, close by out there. So he spent 10 years managing the father-in-law's farm. And that was the story of that. He had suffered one major loss later. Now, this happened earlier. There's one of the canyons in Yosemite is called Hetch Hetchy. It was a huge canyon, not unlike the Yosemite Valley. And the city of California, the city of San Francisco needed it for water. They wanted to dam the valley and fill it with water. He was, of course, adamantly, crazily against that. It passed through legislation in the state man. This is before it became the national park. This before it was in process. It was in process. They blocked it. The Sierra Club blocked it. It opened up again. New president came in and allowed it. Taft allowed it to happen. So, in fact, they did end up, and he was crushed by it. He was very old then. They flooded the valley. It's now water supply for San Francisco. You can make the argument anyway, but he was against the use of that land for resources. He was against the loss of a valley like that. I mentioned Ansel Adams, and I had this picture at home. This is the Yosemite Valley, the very famous view of it. Ansel Adams was younger than John Muir. They overlapped a little bit, but Ansel was a child when John Muir had died, so there was no interaction of the two of them. But he was instrumental in bringing it to the attention of the world with his photographs, and I'm sure we've all seen at least a fair amount of them. Fabulous, fabulous work, fabulous artist. So he's really helped to popularize, I think, the whole region of the out there. So it's a beautiful area, and there we go. So it became a national park. They both did, and then more and more national parks. We have a lot. I hope everybody's been to some. So that's my story of that. And this is the last picture of him as he was getting very old. He didn't die that old, actually. He died at 77, so he didn't die that old. I should be careful with that. You gotta be careful with that. He died a young man. Let me rephrase that. So that's my story.
Okay, now we bring on David Attenborough, presented by Art Courier.
So what do you think of this man who is in this picture? He's now 99 years old. So he is what you call a serious elder because he's still in the field. He's still out there. And needless to say, he's been given a lot of acknowledgments through various species that have been named after him, as well as a constellation. That doesn't happen every day. Okay, we're going to get into who he was. And that holding a little lemur there is indicative of how he really dove into life young by being in the forest around Leicester, England, and he became a fossil addict and rock addict. He loved taking apart what was put on the earth, and it transformed his life, as it says, into the natural world. So his early days, he was not a teenager running around with a lot of other teenagers who didn't come into the woods and go with him. And he studied both natural science as well as he got a master's in art. So he was certainly qualified from an educational point of view to keep going. And fortunately, early, he became connected with BBC. And he was the presenter on Zoo Quest. So I'll take the next slide because that interview that got him to be on Zoo Quest was an error at BBC. He went for one position, but he was given this opportunity, which was much better for him in terms of allowing his life to blossom. And they consider him to be one of the leading naturalist experts in the world. And how many people have seen a David Attenborough presentation on PBS? Okay, because there's a lot of them. And needless to say, he was an early advocate for what we need to do to control our world so it's sustainable for the future. And in that vein, because of the BBC program, plus the books, he's been in the face of millions of people. And if you haven't seen him, I suggest you go home and look at PBS or Netflix and watch what he does. The next perspective is something that sums it up. I mean, I'm going to let you read that because That's a pretty powerful statement from a very wise man who is, as we said, still impassioned. And I think the fact that he's been touched so many people is because of the last part of that. It makes really life worth living from his perspective. That was what he was about, okay? And as a writer and producer, these are some of the programs that he produced in a life series, plus a number of books. Now, believe it or not, this only goes to 2008, but in this year, Oceans, a revolutionary story that he's telling through this film entitled Oceans. We all want to see it. It's a statement of hope, but also an understanding of the realities of what we're facing. So hopeful aspirations is very important because we know there's part of what's happening that's not very hopeful. So we here have to be hopeful. And next is a little recognition. He's Sir David. He was knighted, and then he was given an Order of Merit in 2005. So that's a statement of symbolism of how important he is to the British Empire, at least Great Britain. And he's received Emmys, television awards, the Goodreads Choice Awards. So he's acknowledged by the outside world as having contributed significantly to what we all know as the natural world. And next is his accomplishments. Well, you can imagine just writing those books and producing those films is plenty of accomplishments. And he's been involved in 3D television. His early roots in television has maintained a technological edge in dealing with the nuances in broadcast. And in 2015 at 89 there, he made the record deepest ever dive on the reef in Australia. He's also collaborated on a virtual reality project, and needless to say, the BBC series that's gone on forever and ever and is still today, Nature and Planet Earth 2, they're exquisite productions. But as he said, we need to be serious here because PBS is where this stuff is viewed. And needless to say, those that want the rest of the world to remain ignorant as they are trying to do something to have PBS go away. Not by my standards, something we want to have happen. So let's hope that the engine on the fire that's being talked about by the president of PBS will happen. He has considered by President Obama, who was a great admirer of him, and he promoted what Sir David did over the course of time. You probably, those of you who've seen pictures with him, he's in the mountains with the gorillas, with the orangutans hanging on him, with poisonous snakes that he's holding, because he believed you needed to be connected with the species that you're talking about. That being part of their life makes you part of the natural world to a more appreciative degree. Next is a statement that I think we can all relate to. Because what I'm asking you to do, since you're here, is to think about who you're going to invite to be with you for the next eco conversation. We're fortunate to be in a very, let's say, environmentally sensitive area, given all the resources that are here. We've got a lot of very conscious environmentalists, and you're seeing some, and they're in this room, and they're out in the community. And all our communities have to work together because this is an ecosphere we're dealing with. It's not the community of Newburyport. The marsh doesn't end at the border of Newburyport. And our natural world doesn't end at any community borders. So the business community, as well as the houses of worship community, as well as the creative community, have to all come together. So there's going to be more about that in a way that makes a great deal of sense. So I hope that you will participate with us to make our communities more sustainable for the future. Because in 2025, we are 25 years away from 2050. 25. And what has to be accomplished is amazing. I look forward to talking to you further about that later. Thank you.
Last but not least, Sylvia Earle, presented by Michael himself.
All right. I can do it. I can do it. Thank you. I'm Michael Watkins, and I'm covering Sylvia Earle. How many here know or have heard of Sylvia Earle before? Okay, so she's not as well known as the others that were presented. I was also going to ask, there is a Netflix documentary about her called Mission Blue. Has anybody here seen that? Okay, not so many takers, but that's fine. So I'm glad to introduce her to you. I wanted to point out something common with actually Jane Goodall. One, they're both vegetarians, so that's a life choice that they made to help improve the planet. And with Rachel Carson, all three of them were pioneers in their fields and faced challenges because they were women. This was in the 60s, plus or minus, even Rachel Carson in the 50s. Their accomplishments alone are amazing, but they faced more challenges than the male species because they were women, and people were not ready to listen to them. So I wanted to start with those common items. You bet. So she was born in August 30th, 1935 in New Jersey, and she's going to turn 90 this year in just a few months. She and her siblings, I believe she's one of three sisters, grew up on their family farm in Camden, New Jersey. Then, maybe 12 years old, they moved to Florida, and their property was on the Gulf of Mexico. And that became her playground and laboratory. She spent a lot of time out in the water, in the eelgrass, and checking out algae, seaweed. She went on to college. She got her undergraduate degree and master's degree, and then she got married, had a family. So there was about a 10-year gap between that degree, and then she went back to school to Duke University, which is where she'd gotten her master's degree, and she got her PhD at Duke. Her degrees were in botany, but the botany was seaweed. So, and I believe she collected 40,000 samples of seaweed for her PhD thesis. So that's some dedication. So she definitely, she did postgraduate studies, had fellowships, she had a distinguished career as an oceanographer, teacher, author, and ocean advocate. She also, and we started with Rachel Carson, we're ending with Sylvia Earle, so she was influenced by Rachel Carlson, and she wrote an introduction to a 2018 edition of Carson's best-selling book, The Sea Around Us. Okay, so I also wanted to emphasize this quote. I took this from the trailer to her documentary. So 60 years ago, when I began exploring the ocean, no one imagined we could do anything to harm it. Think about the Earth without an ocean. You have a planet like Mars, no ocean, no life, no ocean, no us. She was the chief. There basically was this underwater experimental place to live off of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And she spent 2 weeks as the chief of this team living under the ocean, which is pretty amazing. It was about 15 meters, which is about 50 feet. Again, I wanted to emphasize, this was an all-female, all-woman team, and they were doing something at the time that men would have been doing. So she wanted to show we're just as capable as men in doing this science and this kind of activity. She was definitely active with all kinds of water sports, swimming, snorkeling, diving, but she also got to do numerous dives in submersibles, which I think is pretty cool. And let's see. In 1979, she set and still holds the record. She wore one of those big kind of space suits, the really hard suit. She went down 1,250 feet to the bottom of the ocean, untethered, and walked around for quite a while. I don't remember how long, but she basically set a record for that depth, set a record for the amount of time wandering around at the bottom of the ocean. So just, pioneering that. Okay, so she was, after having all that experience and spending so much time in the ocean, she was named the first female chief scientist of NOAA in 1990. She held that position until 1992, and the documentary on her does a good job of covering that. One of the things she said is she went to give a talk, and she was asked, as that role, she was asked not to speak again at some of the meetings. They weren't ready to listen to, I'll say, this woman talk, and no. So after a couple years, she basically decided, I'm done with the federal government, I'm done with them holding me back, and she went back to being a private citizen to have the freedom to pursue her science and to say what she wanted to say without being controlled. So chief scientist in 1990. In 2017, Time magazine honored her as the first hero for the planet, and here she is on the cover of the magazine, which is also honoring women who are changing the world. So she was also a pioneer for deep sea exploration. She had more than 100 expeditions and spent more than 7,000 hours underwater. Can you imagine that? Yes. I don't think I've spent 7,000 hours in the water, any water, swimming, and she was underwater. Let's see. Also she started scuba diving when scuba diving was first invented, so just her scuba diving work was pioneering. That's something to keep in mind. She's written a lot. She's authored over 200 scientific publications and published over 10 books. I tried to find the exact number of books, and the internet wouldn't tell me, and AI wouldn't tell me. Just kept saying more than 10. So she was named a National Geographic Explorer in Residence, which was pretty significant as well. We all know National Geographic. Okay, so Mission Blue. Mission Blue is this documentary. It's on Netflix. It's still available, and I strongly recommend that you watch it. It gives lots of good biographical information about her, shows some of the science she's done. In the special, she went diving to this coral reef she'd been to in the past and was able to witness the degradation and coral bleaching in an area where it wasn't expected. She won a TED Talk Prize in 2009, which gave her $100,000, and she used that to start a foundation called Mission Blue. Mission Blue also created something called Hope Spots. And these are spots that are kind of like preserves, but they're significant. Some of the criteria is basically, if you're going to save a place, these are very special places to save. They're small, but they have a lot of biodiversity in them. So they're highly valuable. It's kind of like, well, if you're going to save a spot, you should save this spot. Most of them are on land, but some of them are just out in the middle of the ocean. So, and again, definitely see the documentary. Okay, so the Hope Spots, 164 have been created so far. They're in 115 countries and maybe 10 or more out in the open ocean. I'll just say, so some of it was to help combat overfishing, pollution, and climate change by promoting conservation efforts and sustainable practices. Her organization is still going, and they're looking to add more Hope Spots. I really like this picture of her in a submersible as, I'll just say, a senior or a young person, if we want to. And I just love the way she's gazing out into the ocean. So there is actually a group of people called Ocean Elders, and she is one of them. That fits with our theme this month. She's the chairman, founder, and president of Mission Blue. Like I said, she's going to be 90 years old in August. The thing is, just like David Attenborough at 99 years old, she's still active. She's very active. She still dives. She leads expeditions, leads her foundation, so she's going strong. National Geographic gave her a new title similar to the old one, but it's National Geographic Explorer at Large. Basically, she can do whatever she wants to. Okay, and this wouldn't be complete without a call to action and just a kind of a summary about the Earth and the ocean. So there's only one planet Earth. Our blue planet is 70% water. 97.5% of that is salt water, 2.5% fresh. Of the fresh water, actually, most of it is locked up in ice. In the ice caps and glaciers, that's where the majority of the fresh water is. Then a significant portion is in groundwater. You can get to it if you drill it, but it's basically also really not accessible. So the amount of actual fresh water that we have access to is like 0.5%. And we all know we're not taking the best care of it. So just wanted to share those facts. There have been analogies between exploring the ocean and exploring space, and space is better explored than our ocean is. 80% of it remains unexplored. 20 to 26% has been mapped with modern imagery and technology. I wanted to point out by 2050, there may be more plastic in the ocean by weight than fish or marine organisms. And this has been in the news a lot lately. Microplastics have been detected in marine life and in our own human bodies. We don't know what the effect of that is. I'll add that plastic has been found at the deepest part of the ocean at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. So with all of those things in mind, I guess I want to give the message just like everybody that was covered in the presentation today, inspire others to take action like Sylvia Earle and the others. And again, her quote, "No ocean, no life, no ocean, no us." All right.